Welcome to the Marshall McAdam Data and Analytics Podcast, where leaders in data, analytics and AI in Australia drop by and talk data to me. I'm your host, Tim Hutchinson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Guillaume Jaudoin, the Head of Growth for Altis. Altis is an innovative data and analytics consultancy with offices in Australia, New Zealand and the UK. Today, Guillaume and I are going to explore trends in data and analytics and also explore data as the backbone of Industry 4.0. We'll get into that right after this.
Welcome to the Marshall McAdam Data and Analytics Podcast, where Australian business leaders and experts discuss the data challenges facing organisations today and the opportunities for innovative business in the future. Let's get the conversation started.
Guillaume, absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
I think you get the now customary virtual applause.
What other sound effects do you have?
This one, if you drop a...
Well, don't use that on me.
I'm not sure about the others, I think. Hang on.
Right. Yeah, use that.
Yeah, we might need that one, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we're here to talk today about, I think, trends in the data and analytics space.
Yes.
I will have already introduced you in your role at Altis, the consulting firm in data and analytics. And we're going to look at Industry 4.0 as well and the role of data and analytics there. But before all of that, we have to find something out about the non-data Guillaume. Mm-hmm. And I understand when you're not diving into data lakes, you're diving into real lakes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm a very keen scuba diver. I dive around Sydney, around Australia when I can. With the kids, it's a bit harder to get out and dive, but I still get a few dives a month. So I actually can relate data to my diving.
Please do get into the data.
So actually, in my time at Altis, I've been doing many different things, but one of them is doing training. So data visualization training, data modeling training, and very often when you do training, you need to use a data set.
Okay.
And I was bored of using the same, sales data sets and product and locations and all that. So I said, I could use my dive log data instead.
Yeah, okay.
So I prepared the training using, the dive log data and doing the data modeling. And I actually had it in a small repository, all my dive log data in a repository, and I'll put a dashboard on it and visualize where I dived in the world, the average depths and visibility and the temperature and all of that.
How cool is that?
Yeah. So you could see that in the early days I was very keen. I was doing like 50 dives a year, something like that. It sort of dropped with the kids, with working life and all that. But still good to see the trend. So I used that in the trainings, and I think it was a bit more interesting to the audience.
Real world stuff. Moving on to the analytics, data and analytics space. We're going to hear, I think, about a whole wealth of experience that you've gained, and also, I think, your view of where that space is heading. But first of all, talk to me about how you ended up in that world.
Well, when I was at uni, it's not like today where the data-related jobs are pretty cool and hot. Data scientist, data engineer. There's a ring to it.
Yeah, it's sexy now.
Yeah. Back then, it was. You wouldn't choose a job like that in data from uni. So I finished uni, and in my first job, I was actually in Spain, and I had the choice between being a web developer, and doing work in business intelligence.
But sorry, what had you studied beforehand?
Master of IT Information Management.
Okay.
Yeah, in France.
Yep.
And I was given the options at the Spanish company I was working for, to go either PHP web developer or to go with business intelligence. And I thought, wow, business intelligence, I've got no idea what that is, but that sounds interesting. I'd done a bit of the other ones, so
yeah, sure.
I said, I'll just do that. So yeah.
But what's funny is, correct me if I'm wrong, but 15 years ago, the PHP piece and the web development piece will have been the sexy part.
Yeah, I know, but I think in business intelligence there's intelligence, so I thought just the title would compensate for maybe my capabilities. But that was actually a very interesting piece, and I think you get to know a lot more about the business you're working for,
Yeah,
like
sure,
the actual process in the business in that. And the first gig I had in that space was for a Mexican company called Cemex. They had big offices in Spain.
Yeah.
And I was involved in the modeling of all their forecasting and budgeting process.
Right. Okay.
So they would assume a certain amount of cement that they need to produce, and you'd have models to forecast the whole supply chain. And I was like, I learned so much about cement.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you can't, and I still remember stuff that I shouldn't. But there is. So that was interesting, and you get very deep into understanding the business that you're working for with that kind of role. It's probably not the case if you do software development, if you go web development. Yeah,
sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also now, in hindsight, you can claim to be something of a futurist as well. That you saw the future.
Yeah, I saw that I was going to be hot 15 years later.
Made the uncool decision at the time.
Yeah,
look where you are now. So good work. So having gained this prior experience, how long have you now been with Altis?
It's going to be 10 years in February next year, I think.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's a long time, yeah.
And for those, perish a thought, but for those who aren't aware of Altis as a consulting firm, perhaps you'd able to do two things, really. Tell us a bit about Altis, but then perhaps relate that to what you've seen over that decade. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, that's a hell of a long time, a heck of a long time in data. See what you've seen, see what changes.
So Altis is a consulting company. The founders are still the owner of the company. Mm-hmm. We were founded 22 years ago. Okay. 23 even. Here in Sydney. So HQ here in Sydney. We've got offices around Australia, in New Zealand, and the UK. We've got 115 happy staff. With us. And I'll say happy staff because this is the way we run the business. We make our staff happy so that they look after our customers, so that our customers like us and come back to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it too trite a question to ask you how you make them happy?
Well, there is the different levels. There is obviously interesting projects. There's obviously the salaries part. You work for a salary.
Yep.
We look after them. There is really I don't know if it comes from the fact that the founders are actually a family, but there is that family spirit. We look after one another. There's a lot of instances where you can observe people helping out, even though they have no direct interest in helping their friends. They're really there's really that. And every 2 or 3 years, we take everybody in the company with their families, the kids, and when we take them to Queensland, we went to Fiji for the 20 years anniversary.
Oh wow!
So that's everybody. Even we fly the guys from the UK.
Wow!
So that's
so you're talking about 200 heads, or
that was, I think last time was 350, 400 because you come kids.
Where do you take them apart from Fiji, etc.? Where do you physically?
It's
store them.
On a plane when they fly in, and then we book a whole hotel.
Amazing.
And we're going back in April next year as well, somewhere in Sunshine Coast. So
fantastic!
Yeah.
Wow,
looking forward to that as well. So that's how we look after our staff. Yeah.
And does the firm continue to grow now?
Yeah, we're still growing, still hiring. It's a very, very hard market. We need people, so we're hiring very.
And you're presumably coming across the challenges that others are coming across.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which is why the stuff you touch on, having a really strong employer value proposition, is so critical.
Yeah, for retention,
because the person you want isn't sitting at home short of work, are they? No, understood. So during your time at Altis, then, what have you seen change?
Well, I can probably relate that to my role and the project I've been on. So very early on, I was working in the BI space, so data warehouse, ETL, business intelligence. That's a sort of the holy trinity of 15 years ago in data management. So you'd be dealing with data that are very financial data, HR data. So you'd pretty much plug your data warehouse into an ERP and try to get insights out of that.
Yes. Okay.
So standard reporting, financial reporting. That was about it. And then with the explosion of data, like internet creating more and more data, and then IoT after that, and all that, there is all of a sudden so much more data available to the customer and to any company, and they feel there is something that they need to do with the data. So the technology approach processes that we had 15 years ago, that was not enough. So we needed to land on the data on frameworks that were capable of handling bigger data sets, variety of data sets. So we were not just talking about numbers, but also, unstructured data sets, semi-structured data sets.
Yes, okay, yep.
Even talking about images, videos, and all of that. So it's the explosion of data that's driven the change in technology. And since then, we've sort of been catching up with, the amount of data that we need to.
But plus, presumably, the computing power has allowed that to happen.
That's right. And there's the emergence of cloud as well. So the big cloud players. So I'm specializing in AWS, but the other cloud players as well I've seen that coming, and I've provided the tools to be able to deal with that. So you don't have to, have your own server farm, in your offices and on your own data center and all that. It's make so much simpler to scale and be able to handle that kind of data volumes.
So just recapping on that, if you look, 10, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, the first projects you're working on might relate to BI, for example, and now far more complex, progressive stuff. But if you relate that to your client base, I mean, I might be wrong, but our snapshot of it is that there's a vast proportion of businesses are still at the beginning of that. They're still 10 years ago, or not even at that point. Is that fair? Or
the fact is, there's been back 10 or even 5 years ago, there's been big investments in those sort of traditional data warehouses.
Yes,
but it's still relevant today. You still need to do your financial reporting. You still need to do, your traditional analytics.
But sorry, on that point, I mean, we still have clients, no names, of course, who are struggling with that still.
Well, you need to help them do that, and at the same time and in parallel, embrace the big data world.
Yes,
So you can do both at the same time. There are technologies around that can do both, or approaches and architectures that can allow you to get the foundations right, get the traditional data processes right, and then you can have the more advanced use cases coming on top of that in parallel. And sometimes they're not even the same teams. You can get IT looking up after one, and then you've got some business analytics teams that look after the other ones.
So in terms of the more progressive areas, where is that innovation driven from? And I guess I might give you a sort of a multi-choice. Is it you guys driving it to an extent? Does it originate with the client, or are you perhaps looking across the pond to the US or somewhere? Where's the real cutting edge? Who originates the cutting edge stuff?
So it always comes from it has to be driven by the business. Like you can give ideas. You can talk about the trends like we're doing today and what other in the industry, what they're doing, but you need to have a need internally at the customer, and you identify that and you talk to them about the options they have at hand. So, to answer to your questions, it's not one source of innovation. It comes from everywhere. We have to keep across what's happening in the industry, and we have strong focus on certain industries. So we can keep our customers aware of that. But there are also a lot of people within our customers that are very much aware of the trends, and they actually come to us and say, "Well, can we talk about this? How can you help us?"
Right. Okay.
To run this.
And how do you guys stay across the latest trends?
Well, we have industry practices led by practice leads. So we have higher education, we've got finance, we've got transport, logistic, we've got energy, utilities, and all of these guys and girls, they go into farms. They know where to get that kind of information. They have the experience of the delivery, and when you deliver, you talk to the business and you talk about, and they talk to you about their problems and what they need from data, and that's the ongoing process of I'll find out an issue who else has had this issue in the industry, how they solved it, this sort of thing. So,
well, there's another question, which is how do you have a sense of where Australia fits in terms of innovation in data and analytics versus the rest of the world?
There are there are some companies that are, I think, who have a presence, a global presence, that, embrace technology and embrace innovation. I don't think there's a lag in Australia. A lot of our customers have, are either US based or they have global presence. And Australia is actually a market where things are being tried out.
I've heard this before.
So there are companies who consciously think Australia is. There are companies who feel that Australia is a good market because it's similar in some aspects to what you could get in the US or in Europe.
Yeah, sure.
You've got similar customer behavior, but yet it's not. It's not such an investment to try things here because it's, the population is not as big, and you don't have to.
And dare I say, it's slightly lower profile.
I don't know, and maybe if I think you'd be forgiven if you make an error here. People are more forgiving, I think, here than they'd be somewhere else. Yeah,
it's an interesting point because one of the things, we used to do a huge amount of work in the finance space. So ERP implementations, etc.
Yep.
And what was always apparent was there were so few multinationals that are headquartered in Australia. And at the it's shifting a bit with people like Atlassian becoming global success stories. But a few years back, people always name-checked Cochlear and one or two other businesses who were innovative, headquartered here. But other businesses then felt they lagged in terms of decisions were being made offshore around systems implementations. And they tended to get this sort of the poor end of that here. But it feels different in data.
Well, we still see decision around technology and what you can use and can't use being made elsewhere and put down on the Australian market. So that's still happening. But also I think there's because we're talking about systems that not necessarily critical to the business, then there's more liberty in making a decision to use a different approach, different technology, try out things. And because cloud, it's much cheaper to try stuff.
Of course.
So the local, so the domestic IT department have more, it's easier for them to go and say, well, we're going to try that for 6 months and it's just going to cost us 20 grand. It's easily justified. Whereas back 5-10 years ago, if you wanted to do an ERP implementation, that was 2 years.
You're millions of dollars.
Yeah, and you'd have to have sign up from the CFO global. To get that. So that's what has changed, I think.
No,
it's easier to try it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you're describing within those changes as well is this classic shift from, projects or decisions being driven from IT and now being driven by the business.
Yeah.
So first of all, is that the case that you're seeing? And if so, what other knock-on effects does that have in terms of data governance or whatever else it might be?
So, we're finding that the business drives it, the data initiatives. It's very often driven by the business, with IT executing it and being very, very important in the picture. They need to be, they need to be part of the picture, absolutely.
Do you ever see tension there?
We see tension where actually it's the other way around, and IT thinks that the business should be, progressing in their data adoption.
Right.
Business is not ready for it.
Interesting.
So there sometimes is tension, but when it's business driven and IT comes to the table as well, that's the perfect that's the perfect situation. And so what's changed is that business realizing the importance of data, the value of data as well. It's probably not something that was the case 5 years ago, 10 years ago, where decision was made more on a gut feel than, with accurate data, rational thinking behind, after looking at the data. So they realized that they need to be more data driven. Actually, if you look at all the strategies around the 5-year strategies, most of them have a data component, being we want to be more data driven. We want to make decisions based on data more. So that means that IT aligns to that, obviously, and they can then prepare the platforms. They can then prepare their teams to be able to deliver on that. So and going back to to the initial comments we had around data being relevant more, even if you think 10 years ago, you think about the DBA role.
Yeah.
And you think about data engineer and data scientist role now, who's got more impact? They've got a lot of impact today. Yeah.
I mean, they were dry roles and
absolutely
certainly not regarded as sexy at the time, and now have massive impacts.
And no much of a added value. Like they were only noticed where things were failing back then.
Exactly, absolutely. Just that point around businesses that are increasingly data driven or data driven. I mean, so much of that clearly comes back to who the CEO is, doesn't it?
Yeah, so you're right. We often see when there's a new CEO arriving and that has the data vision, it does change a lot. But I feel there are other people in the organization who have this kind of impact. We've seen very data-focused CFO as well. You got CDO becoming more and more relevant as well. And there is that ownership around data that's separated from IT with the CDO role. And they are the ones very often driving the initiatives around data. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily need to have a CEO that's strongly aligned with that. It helps if it is, but it's not necessary.
But at least receptive to it.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
So that's a significant shift over that decade, and clearly it's an ongoing involvement.
Yep.
When we did a bit of prep together, we were talking sort of about the future and trends in the space and how that relates to, a lot of people I think would describe data as the backbone of industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution.
Yep.
Talk to me about that. Where do you let's put your futurist hat on? Where's it all heading?
So, if we look at what we have today, the main consumer of the insights driven by what we do around data and analytics are either a human being or in some instances you've got a closed system that think about, for example, the recommendation engine from Amazon.
Yes,
that's obviously data driven. There is AI behind it and so on. But so it's very much limited to a B2C kind of market, and it's related to of almost sales and marketing pretty much all of the time. Okay,
sure.
If we talk about
just on that point around, I mean that was felt to be progressive a few years back, and you describe it almost there as, I'm paraphrasing for you, but as just straightforward. But is there still innovation happening in that?
Oh yeah.
Space.
Not everybody is doing it, but everybody's at least aware of it, and that can be done. Okay, so there is. So yeah, I understand your question is, does that change? I think the algorithm behind are obviously evolving, but the principles are still the same. If you were aware of stats and this kind of machine learning algorithm back 20 years ago, not a lot has changed. What has changed is more the data you feed into your algorithm and the application of it. It's more more than you've got more and more people able to do it.
Sure.
You've got more and more companies able to do it, and the applications as well are different. Like you could feed data that's coming from IoT devices, as opposed to just your website data coming into.
Yeah, so sure.
That's what has changed. So,
but that space will incrementally develop. So where is that sort of evolution? Where's the revolution happening?
All right. So the revolution is happening where it's actually these data principles are going to apply to manufacturing, to supply chain, to sort of more heavy industry, where you've got robotics coming into the game, and instead of having the sort of last mile and the customer facing processes being data driven, you'll have the whole supply chain. You'll have everything sort of related, automated, with data being the backbone of that. And almost having a close the loop where whatever you do in your supply chain impacts the the processes before and after that, almost in real time.
Okay. Are you able? I know what you're talking about, but are you able to put that together in a real world example or a hypothetical example?
Well, if you think about maybe in the airline industry, so there are a lot of touch points with the customers in the booking the ticket. You know, I know a lot of us would like to be able to do that and fly somewhere, but we haven't been.
I can't remember anything of what you're talking about.
All right. So you'd go to a website. You would go and look for the destination and the flights, and you book that. And then there are a lot of touch points. Like you go to the airport, you put your luggage, you check in, you board, you've got the journey itself, and so on. Well, there are probably 20 different systems involved in all of that.
Okay.
And they're pretty separate, you know. And what you could do, and some companies are already doing it, is actually be able to, at the moment of booking, being able to identify, what you need for that specific customers to be available on the plane. You know, if you've got someone who's used to fly with your company, well, you need to be able to bring up the profile and select his favorite seat and select his favorite menu, food on the menu, these sort of things, and should be end to end. And if there is a glitch during the process, this must be acknowledged by all the other the other pieces in the process.
Yeah, right. I see.
Yeah. And so, for example, if there is a lost luggage, next time around, you say, for example, at booking time, you say, well, your connection needs to be a bit longer where you travel there, because last time you lost your luggage because you only had 1 hour. So this is the stuff. Again, this is an example that's very, very customer focused again.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's to show you the sort of data integration that happens along the way between all the different systems, and that needs to be in real time. That needs to be all integrated, and being able to see that, identify that you're the same customers at booking time and the one that's waiting for the luggage on the belt.
We're sort of, I guess, future gazing to an extent, but I'm guessing that whilst challenging, those problems are solvable now. Is that fair?
We're getting there. I think the technology is there, and as you said, there are some places that are looking into it, but they need to get the foundation first. So that the conversation that we had around, you can start the innovative stuff while you get the platform. It's up to a point. You still need to get solid foundations at some point before you push too far ahead in the industry 4.0. And not all of our customers actually need that. We've got a lot of customers that have nothing to do with supply chain manufacturing and all that.
So assuming if I get that answer right, the tech is there. There's a whole sort of behavioural piece and an implementation piece and all the rest of it. I'm going to put you on the spot here. What about in another 10 or 15 years beyond that? What is there? Do you sometimes have your own sort of private thoughts around, as a free thinking French maverick, around where the world's heading in data and analytics?
Well, look, it's always a hard one to make prediction, and that one is actually on tape. So I want to be careful, but I think there is going to be, it's going to be more adoption of this, and it's going to be shortening the wait time before between demand and the build of the product. That's going to be what's going to happen.
And what about, I'm off track here, but I'm thinking about things. You mentioned a dive computer.
Yeah.
But as we start to get, more adoption of wearables, or we get I think I've read about people having implanted wearables now. Presumably, I'm going to be a walking data feed in a few years' time, am I?
Yeah, and it's already that implants are already generating data. There's something that they're generating data, and it's part of their functionality to actually provide data to whoever the practitioner is to have an understanding whether the implant is actually working. So it's not a negotiable thing. The data needs to be needs to be provided for a lot of these disciplines. Now it's what you do with data. It's what you it's actually coming to realize that data and the insight is actually sometimes what where the value is itself. And you start talking about data monetization.
I was going to ask you about this. It's one thing to gather data, it's one thing to do something with it, but how do businesses ultimately, empowered businesses value, monetize it, create value?
So there is the direct the direct use of the insight, which is it reduces cost or increases your revenue. That's the direct business benefit, and that's what today everybody is working towards.
Okay.
But then there is the insight that's actually something that you could solve, separate. If you think about, for example, in the insurance business, you could have businesses that make the same or more money out of the insights that they get from the data, and they sell that rather than the policies that they sell directly. Because there is a lot of information. There is a lot of information about people, about behavior that they can get.
And sorry, I'm not sure I understood that. You're talking about data sharing?
Yep.
Are you talking about potentially sharing the platform and the capability that a business has developed, or are you talking about the actual aggregating the data and it raising all boats, as they say?
It's actually both.
Right. Okay.
The sharing platform is something that's already happening.
Yeah.
There are technologies for that where the data is being shared between companies that are in a partnership somehow. You can think of a media company and a restaurant, fast food company.
Yep.
Doing data sharing to see what kind of food is being ordered with what kind of programs that are on TV.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So you could then have insight out of that can impact supply chain, that can impact promotions, so on and so forth. The cost of advertising.
Yeah, sure.
During that specific program. So that's already happening.
Okay. Yep.
The one I was talking more about, it's more not necessarily sharing the data, but selling the data and selling the insight. And that's you'll find that there are marketplaces popping up about, and you subscribe like a Netflix for data, and you subscribe to the insight, you subscribe to the data set. Obviously there is those are anonymized, there's all the context around privacy that you need to respect, but there is that potential, and those data sets can be around, what's the, when you establish the price, your premium for insurance, well, it's very important to know the behavior of the population, the likelihood of an accident and these sort of things. Yeah.
Do you ever think that if ultimately, it'll never happen, I guess, but ultimately if there's a perfect supply of data, and there's perfect sharing and there's perfect efficiency, ultimately doesn't the competitive edge disappear? Doesn't everybody end up at the same point?
Oh, that's a good point. Then I think you have to be even more innovative, and it's.
I mean, insurance comparison is a very good one. It's a really good example where there used to be huge price disparities, but companies can't get away with it anymore. And as a consumer, you have access to information, and if they're ultimately sharing consumer information, then their pricing is probably going to be similar. So I wonder where the innovation ends up.
Well, you'd have to offer your customers more. You have to offer better services. You have to be easier to deal with. It's and it's free market. It's how you. I
mean, the irony is, I feel the whole thing will come full circle, and what will win the customer is old school, high touch customer service.
It could be. It could. But I think with every innovation and industry revolution that you've seen, with automation, like you've had one of the, in car manufacturing, someone has done the automation to a better point, and then everybody's caught up. And then you could say, well, in sort of the same price range, all the cars would be the same and the cost would be the same. But then there are other levels, I think, to attract your customers, and that's about service. This, but if you talk about the car, it's the style of the car. It's about how you understand your customer, how you think they think, how and it's about understanding them better. So innovation is there to make things easier. It's to support you, but you still need to have that customer focus to really make stuff that matter to your customer. You could be the most innovative company in the world, but if you don't care about your customer, that's ultimately
absolutely,
you don't go anywhere.
Hey, look, we've covered a lot of stuff. I might just ask you one or two other things. Are there, as of today, are there particular projects you'd love to get involved in? As I'm thinking of Altis, and really, you'll presumably be delivering some BAU type work to clients, and then some more progressive work. Is there a call that you would love to get to say, this is what we're trying to solve?
It's probably related to Data for Good. I don't know if you know about Data for Good. It's an initiative. Altis is actually behind Data for Good.
Okay.
And it's trying to make a better world using data.
Okay.
So there are a lot of applications to that. And I'd love to be more involved in, in projects that tend to solve big issues for humanity. And I think data is key to that. If you think about, the climate change issues.
Absolutely.
If you think about poverty and how, people get access to water.
If you think about a global pandemic and trying to tackle it.
Like if you think about that, and in the first 2 or 3 months of the pandemic, everybody daily was looking at a chart of number of cases, and certainly the number of deaths as well. And now, a year after, we're looking at a chart around vaccine adoption.
Absolutely.
So everybody has realized that data is actually quite important.
Absolutely.
And we were lucky we were involved in some of these government-driven initiatives around the vaccines and around.
So tell me a bit about Data for Good or Data for Good. What is it? What is Altis's involvement?
Yeah. So the founders of Altis founded Data for Good, I think 2 or 3 years ago. It started with conferences where we would invite people to talk about how they use data to solve today's issue.
Is it regarded as an Australian?
Yeah, so it's the
initiative?
Australian. It's the Australian. It's an Australian initiative.
Yeah.
There are other Data for Good initiatives elsewhere in the world, and then we have partners actually funding Data for Good.
Okay.
And it helps us build projects to help solve environmental issues. An example is we have underway a project around Tasmanian Devil, and they have a disease.
Yes,
it's a cancer that actually is a transmittable cancer. So it's it's a rare kind of cancer that they get, and it's decimated the Tasmanian Devil population, and we are helping a company there to use pictures of with photo traps, to identify the Tasman tiger, the percentage of population who has the disease, the areas where there's no disease, so they can protect these areas. And manage the population this way, so they can limit the impact.
So Guillaume, disclosure here. You're talking to a zoology student here. I studied zoology at university.
All right, okay.
So that's very interesting to me.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we this is just one of many different projects that we have, and we want to continue that. So Altis staff actually give out time to work on this data project.
Right.
So we've got our consultant.
Yep.
Aside from their project that they're involved in, doing some work on the Data for Good project.
Fantastic.
Altis as well gives hour. So
another factor in having happy staff.
Yeah, exactly. When you do some things that you feel matter, you feel much better about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. So look, we've covered a huge amount. We could probably talk all day, but to probably start to wrap it up. A couple of things really. I'd like share any advice you've got in terms of, depends who it's for really, whether it's for perhaps a data student at university thinking about the future, or whether it's an industry leader thinking we need to get more data savvy. And And then after that, give me a sense of where people can get hold of you.
All right.
And perhaps whether they can get involved in Data for Good in any way.
Yeah, sure. So the first question around advice, I'm not sure if I'm someone to give advices. But if it's someone younger than me, I feel more.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So if I were a student today.
Very modest, yeah.
If I were a student today, I'd say go for the tech, go for the STEMs.
Yep.
That's important. We need more people in STEMs.
Yep.
Especially if you're a lady.
Absolutely.
That's important to get in there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then try to always relate what you learn, be it a technology, a language, to what you think is happening in the real world. So if you learn database technology, SQL, all of that,
yep.
Try to relate, okay, what I'm learning today, how does that apply to a company? How would that, help the business I'm working for in 2-5 years, progress and make better use of data, okay? Try to keep the connection between what you learn, the technology side of things, and the real life side of things. If you're already in the workforce or you're someone, maybe a decision maker, it's sort of the same trend. It's, start with the business question. Don't start with where's the data? Do we have the data?
Yeah, sure.
What's the format of the data? Start with the business question. Start with the problem you have today, and then work your way back to the data after. Check that you actually have a problem to solve and something to gain out of it first. Check that your assumption that you actually need to do it first, and then work out. Because there's no point in having all of the data available if you don't know really what to do with it. So it's about business adoption. It's about change as well, because if you only present your business users with a huge amount of data, they're not going to know what to do with it. So it's about driving it with them, taking them along the journey, starting with what they can do for their day-to-day life with the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Good advice. And if somebody wants to get hold of you, whether it's for Data for Good, whether it's to discuss Altis services, etc.
Well, you can probably put my LinkedIn profile in the description.
Absolutely. Yep.
There is a few people that look after Data for Good as well. Mm-hmm. I can share the contacts as well.
Fantastic, yep.
Can be reached out over LinkedIn, over the Altis website as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining. This podcast was brought to you by Marshall McAdam, creating talent solutions in data, technology, transformation and finance across Australia. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe and share. If you'd like to get in touch with the Marshall McAdam team, simply send an email, visit the website or connect on LinkedIn. Contact details can be found in the description. See you next time.